If you've been anywhere near the internet recently, you've seen that there's an influx of celebrity owned brands. It seems like a celebrity's launching a new brand seemingly every day. You see companies like Mint Mobile owned by Ryan Reynolds, you see Prime, etc. See all these brands launching. And they're kind of interesting. I've always been captivated by these brands. Why now? Why are they all popping up? Why does it seem like every influencer out there now has a company they're running? And one of the questions I always had was, how do they work behind the scenes? Who invests in these companies? Who runs these companies? What are why is it that we're seeing so many of them now? Today's guest, he actually runs a VC fund focused entirely on this world of celebrity owned brands, celebrity owned companies. So we're going to talk about how he got into it. He's made investments in companies that are owned by celebrities like Selena Gomez, Jake Paul, DJ Khaled. We'll talk about his thesis around his VC fund, as well as the kind of the risks of someone who might want to build a company with a celebrity or invest in companies, what the risks they should watch out for are, and what the cons may be. So without further ado, Scott, welcome to the Builders and Funders Show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Exciting to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about celebrity-owned brands. That's the whole theme of this episode. Why did you choose to get into the space? I know you've got an entrepreneurial past. You've built other brands before. Why this space specifically? What was there like a single eureka moment where you were like, man, this space is the one to be in? Like some article you read, or was it just like gradual development of interest?
Well, I don't know. I kind of landed here on accident. It's funny because my background has nothing to do with like influencer marketing or celebrity stuff or whatsoever. But already when I was like 16 years old, I knew that I wanted to become like a venture capitalist. But my path in getting there was definitely not linear. So I was like 18 years old when I started my first company in the e-commerce space, then did a bunch of other things. Then eventually the Dutch government asked if I wanted to move to Silicon Valley to help them basically open up an organization which was helping European startups move from Europe to Silicon Valley because it's just a much larger market with a lot more resources for your startup to grow. So yeah, moved there and I started to work with like a lot of like innovative startups, mainly in the tech space, but also some innovative consumer brands. And at the same time, this was around 2019. I saw a lot of like this first wave of celebrity founded brands, some initial celebrities launching companies, mainly in categories like spirits, like liquor, another tequila brand, or a beauty brand, or like apparel company. And I never understood why they weren't launching like very innovative companies like instead of the super products in oversaturated markets that they were actually launching. So I started to reach out to a couple of the smaller Dutch celebrity friends that I had, asking them the question like, hey, have you been thinking about launching your own brand? And to my surprise, not a lot of them were actually thinking about it. And if they were thinking about it, they were also thinking about launching their own tequila brand or beauty brand or apparel company. So I started to showcase them the companies that I was working with, asking them like, hey, wouldn't you be interested in doing an equity deal with this company where you basically focus on what you do best, and that is creating content and raising brand awareness, and then the company does take care of the operations of the site. So yeah, both of you can just focus on what you do best. And they were like, wait, is that possible? Yeah, we'd absolutely love that. I was like, of course that's possible. So I started to advise a couple of these smaller Dutch celebrities to do this, which eventually turned into a company called Influencer Capital, where we are basically structuring equity deals between startups and influential people. And that already soon expanded to the United States. And today, like 99% of what we do is based in the US. And through that work, I started to build like relationships with celebrities and creators and their teams, which then over the last couple of months have started to invite me to become like an angel investor in their company because they saw the value that I was adding and yeah, just the relationship that we have built. So over the last couple of months, I've like angel invested in companies of people like Selena Gomez, DJ Khaled, Jake Paul, but also some more up and coming celebrities and creators. And then all of a sudden, a lot of people in my network were like, "Hey, Scott, I have money, but I don't have access to these deals. Is there basically a way that I can co-invest with you?" So yeah, I set up a couple of SPVs, allowing folks in my network to co-invest with me. But all of a sudden, I was dealing with 500 LPs who were all interested in this space, and I was like, "Hey, why don't I actually turn this into a fund so that I'm able to write even larger tickets into brands founded by celebrities and creators? And that's how HotStart VC came about.
One thing that I want to get a little bit more information from you on is your thesis. We talked briefly about it, but I want to, if the audience is listening, if anyone in the audience has like a product that they want to pitch, or they've got some startup, what do you look for? Let them know a little more about your thesis and what you exactly. How do you evaluate these investments?
Yeah, so we have a couple criteria. So we used our experiences from all the 55 celebrity founder brands that we have been involved in, as well as in looking at all the successes and all the failures to kind of build our own framework on what works and what doesn't work. And that kind of led to a couple criteria. So one of the criteria that we have is that the best celebrity founder brands are always product first, not celebrity first. What this basically means is that the product should actually be like an innovative something that is actually solving a customer problem. That could be involving technology or patented products or whatsoever. And the quality of it should always be on par or actually exceeding the ones of competitors. Because the celebrity might help you sell the first product, but the quality of the product is going to determine if people are going to buy it the second, third, or fourth time. So I think that is really like an important criteria for us. I think another important criteria for us is the celebrity product market fit. We briefly touched upon it already, but what that basically means is that there should be an authentic fit between the brand the celebrity is launching, the celebrity's persona, content, and audience. So let me illustrate this with a bad and a good example. I will start with the bad example. So there's this model which is called Emrata. Emily Ratajkowski is her full name. She is like a gorgeous looking woman. She often creates content in swimwear, and it helped her to gain 30 million followers online. So she thought it would be a good idea to launch my own female swimwear line. So she launched Inamorata, and at first you would say, hey, that's a great fit because she's like always wearing bikinis. So it fits with her personality. It fits with her content because she's posting about this. And it fits with her audience because it helped her to gain 30 million followers. Well, the brand never really took off because most of her followers are actually males. And males are following her for different reasons than buying female swimwear. And then you have someone like a Danny Austin, who's a lifestyle content creator. She has about 2 million subscribers, I think, on YouTube, and creates content about day-to-day life, about their family and that type of stuff. And then at a certain point, she started to experience hair loss due to stress, where you saw like a lot of bald spots in her hair. And then she became a little bit insecure and didn't want to be in front of the camera anymore. So she stopped content creating for a while. But then she was like, hey, I've been sharing my whole life online. So why don't I share about this as well? So she started to create content about her hair loss journey and doing like wig reviews and that type of stuff. And to her surprise, tens of thousands of women started to engage with that content, saying like, oh, thank you so much for being open about this. You're kind of the first forward facing person to talk about this. This is really helping me. So she was like, hey, why don't you go one step further and try to come up with a solution for this? So for 12 months, he worked with like an R&D team to eventually create a product called DV Hair, which is a hair serum that helps you fight hair loss. In the first year, that company did $40 million in revenue. In the second year, that company did $55 million in revenue. So although she had 2 million followers and Emirat had 30 million followers, Danny Austin was much more successful because there was that authentic celebrity product market fit. And I think a lot of people kind of forget about that. They say, oh, the bigger, the better. Well, that's definitely not the case. I've seen like influencers with 100K followers generate seven figures in revenue. So I think that's really important. And then lastly is team. Team is everything. So it's great to have a celebrity on board, but that person is probably not going to be answering the phone and answering the emails and that type of stuff. So you need an experienced operating team who can actually help you start and scale the brand.
So the big takeaway is like first recurring revenue, some that consumers keep buying, keep coming back to, strong retention. Second is good fit. Make sure that the celebrity that has the market fit. Third is have a great team, have great people around you, not just the celebrity, but also other people who can help with the operations and every other end of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
We kind of like, went over the high level story, but you mentioned the very start, the very beginning was you asking a few of your own kind of smaller celebrity friends who are Dutch about like, hey, why don't you launch your brand? Or are you thinking about it? What do you think? Where's your head at? How did you know these people? Was it kind of just like you're working with the Dutch government and it's just people you're being introduced to left and right? Or was it you like specifically sought them out and like maybe cold DM them? How did those relationships actually begin?
Yeah, so these are just like people that I used to know from, like, I don't know, mutual friends, or like people that I went to high school with, or people that I played soccer with and are now like turning pro. So although they weren't like A-listers in the Netherlands, they still had like a decent following, and I knew them personally. So I would say just the network that I've built without actually thinking or that they're actually celebrities whatsoever.
Yeah, and what is your thesis at this very point? We talked about the general theme of celebrity owned, but what exactly do you look for? You mentioned you've invested in a lot of up and coming celebrities, as well as ones that are very well known, well established, Selena Gomez, etc. What do you look for at this very point?
Yeah, so HotStart VC is a new fund that invests in brands founded by celebrities and creators. What you see in today's world is that we learn about new products and services from the people that we follow online, not anymore from TV ads or billboards or whatsoever. And what has been interesting is that they started to create their own audiences online and are now creating businesses on top of it. And it all has to do with their competitive advantage in company building, as they have a built in audience. They can basically drive near instant traction to their own companies for free by simply posting on their social media channels, and that is something that traditional brands have to pay millions of dollars for. But not only that, like, these celebrities can help like with retail distribution, with fundraising, with PR, all the stuff, because they basically can open doors that other people cannot. So yeah, this already resulted in companies like Skims by Kim Kardashian, Fenty by Rihanna, Prime by Logan Paul and KSI. You mentioned the example of Mint Mobile and Ryan Reynolds, and many more, seeing growth that traditional consumer brands have never seen before. And literally every single celebrity and creator is currently thinking about launching their own brand after seeing the successes of their peers, which obviously leads to a lot of like buzz in the industry. So that's why you see every day like a new brand being launched by a celebrity. But the thing is that most of them are still focusing on kind of this first wave where they're focusing on another tequila brand or rum brand or an apparel company or beauty brand, where oftentimes it's just white labeling stuff, slapping their name on it and selling it for two times the price. I call that superb products in oversaturated markets. We don't care about that. We care about this kind of second wave of celebrity founded brands, celebrities and creators that are launching innovative products and services that actually solve a customer problem, which could also be involving like technology or patented products or whatsoever. That is really what makes us excited. And then we also believe that we can add value to these brands because we have been involved with 55 celebrity founded brands and have also co-founded some of the most successful celebrity founded brands in the space. So one of my venture partners, he co-founded Feastables, the chocolate bar company with Mr. Beast, which is doing like $400 million in revenue in its second year of business. So one of the fastest growing brands ever. Another one co-founded the Honest Company together with Jessica Alba, which IPO'd in 2021, which is one of the only celebrity founded brands ever to IPO. So yeah, we like to think that beyond capital, we can share our learnings working with celebrities and turning their companies into billion-dollar brands, and hopefully replicating the same successes for our portfolio companies.
Fascinating. You mentioned, this transition from you're 18 years old, you're building this e-commerce brand, Dutch government comes up, you've got this opportunity to build that bridge between San Francisco and the Netherlands, and then now transitioning over to being an investor. Something I've always been fascinated by is, this better than I do. As an entrepreneur, you're kind of like excited by every idea you get. You're like, oh yes, I got this idea. I'm going to go build it right away, and there isn't much evaluation. Obviously, maybe if you're more experienced, that happens. But with the investors I've talked to, they're a lot more temperamental. Often they kind of like, they know how to take a step back, they know how to evaluate deals, they've got these parameters and this way of evaluating opportunities in their head. Tell me about that transition, going from the entrepreneur of like, let's just do everything, let's just do it right now, to being an investor and learning how to take a step back, evaluate opportunities, identify the cons before you even let your emotions take hold. What's that transition been like for you?
Yeah, it's funny because I actually don't consider myself like a VC. I consider myself a founder because I'm a founder of a venture capital fund. And I think that is actually very helpful because it helps you to relate to startup founders. Because as a startup founder, you know that things never go according to plan. And it's always like this up and down. I call it like the roller coaster. Like this week is amazing. And then next week, your main client pulls out, or you got a term sheet and that eventually didn't come true. And now you don't have any investment and that type of stuff. So by actually having been a founder, I can relate to these startup founders and share my learnings from being an entrepreneur. I would say the biggest mindset change kind of is that I'm now managing other people's money. So as an angel, sometimes I met someone and I had like a great conversation, and after an hour, I would say, "Yes, count me in. I would love to invest in this." But obviously, as a VC, you're managing other people's money, so you have to do a lot more due diligence, come up with like proper deal memos, talk to a lot of references instead of kind of going on your own gut feeling. So I think that's definitely the biggest change as an investor. You're maybe taking a little bit less risks, uh, because obviously you cannot just afford to lose other people's money just because you had a great meeting or a great relationship with someone else. So yeah, I think the main transition is that I became a little bit more careful in my investments, and yeah, perform a lot more due diligence before we actually jump in, which also makes sense because now you're writing like six-figure checks instead of like 4 or 5 figure checks.
You mentioned becoming a little more risk averse, being a little more cautious, especially given your LPs are trusting you with these, larger amounts of capital. Is there anything that you do consciously to try and take your emotions out of it? Like, some talk about, oh, I meditate. No, some like write down everything, like journal, whatever practice they might have, journaling or meditating. Do you have anything that you personally do to try and get the emotions out? Like, you meet a founder, you really like him, but you're trying to make sure that you stay as objective as possible. Is there any kind of rituals that you've developed around that?
I don't think rituals. I do think that I always let a couple of weeks pass by, just to see how I feel about things in 4 to 6 weeks, if I'm still as excited as I was before. And I also always talk to my team about this, right? It's not anymore me who's making the decisions, but I have a whole team who's like part of the investment committee. So it's like, hey, I think this is a great idea. I think like this works because XYZ. Obviously, these are the risks, but I think they can tackle them with this. And then I look to my team members and I'm like, hey, do you guys agree? They say yes, no. They have calls with the founding team, and then together we make a decision. So I think because of that, you can make a decision much more objective instead of just having one personal opinion and basing an investment based on that.
Absolutely. Before we move on, I want to go back to one of the other things you mentioned that I was thinking about. You mentioned there's been a first wave of celebrities who launch classic products, tequila, this, that, all the classics, traditional stuff that we know in these saturated industries going up against multi-billion-dollar brands. And then you mentioned the second wave that's still coming up, that's still very new. It's innovative products, new products, things that people aren't necessarily doing. A lot of times, with startups, you need validation. You need to know that consumers are actually going to resonate. How do you evaluate when it comes to the product itself that it's something that is worth pairing this celebrity with, right? Like, you're kind of playing almost matchmaker, it seems like, when you talk about it. How do you make sure this, it's not like too innovative, or it's validated, if that kind of makes sense?
No, 100%. Like nowadays, you even have celebrities launching their own space tech companies. So there's this Disney actress, I think she's called Bridget Mendler. And she launched like a space tech company. I think she's trying to compete with like Starlink and that type of stuff. But then it doesn't really matter that you have millions of followers, right? Because these millions of followers are not your customers. Because she has to pitch this to NASA and governments and that type of stuff. And maybe because she has a following, she can get into certain doors. But her audience, yeah, she cannot sell this to her audience. So obviously, you always look, is there a fit between the audience and actually the product that they're selling? So we definitely do due diligence on that, and you have a lot of data there. But sometimes it's also about testing, right? Like so many startup founders, they believe that this is gonna work, and they put it in the pitch deck. But everyone starts without product market fit, and you kind of have by pivoting and iterating, finding out if you actually have product market fit.
You kind of mentioned this idea of like celebrity market fit. Does it make sense? Does the audience fit whatever this product's going to be? That's one of the tests. And then what about the actual field tests you run? Like, is it kind of, because a lot of celebrities, what we're used to is like these big launches, like they do a live stream, they're blasting it all over their social media, telling everybody about it. Are you doing like what would a test like that look like for? Are you just kind of removing the celebrity from it, just doing an objective test without the celebrity, and then going, okay, there seems to be some traction. Let's now do the big launch with the celebrity. How does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so let me take an example of a portfolio company. So, like, I invested in a cannabis infused beverage company that's founded by an actress. You can actually do like a blind taste test where you put their product next to like someone else's products, and then you let consumer test and actually get feedback like, hey, which one do you actually prefer? Without them knowing what the label is, what the branding is, who's the team behind it. So there's obviously those types of tests that you can do. You can also start working with like drops. So maybe you should start with a limited drop before actually turning it into a company. So let's say you are wanting to create like, I don't know, a clean, healthy snack bar. Maybe you should just do one drop, see if it works, and then if you actually get great data, turn it into a company. And if it doesn't work, all good. You know, yeah, you've tried it, you didn't invest a lot of time and resources into it, and you learned a lot.
Hmm. Absolutely. I know we're kind of jumping all over the place. I was curious about that thesis and that evaluation part. Going back to the limited partners part, how did you mentioned you had quite a few people in your network who kind of organically came to you, saw what you're doing, and said, "Hey, Scott, I got some money, but I want access to these deals as well. Can you let me get in on this? Can you let me get in on that?" And then I think you also on LinkedIn talked about going and pitching LPs yourself eventually to really grow this fund and to get more capital in. What was that process like? I think a lot of people, they hear the word VC, they just think you just like magically have $500 million to invest, and they don't really understand that you yourself, like you said, are an entrepreneur. Your job is to manage other people's money to get capital from them, and a part of that is pitching. Love to give more exposure to how that part of running a VC actually works.
Yeah, so as a startup founder, I raised like more than $500,000 for my companies. But I have to say that raising for a fund is like 10 times harder because obviously it's about more money, but it's also about a longer time commitment. So it's really about building relationships. And um, if you're coming out with a new thesis, you have to convince a lot of people. And then it comes back to LP targeting. So what type of LPs are you targeting, and like what are the personas? So the typical LP is probably like a white guy, which is in his 60s, has seen like a couple cycles. If you're gonna tell him or her about the creator economy and the celebrity ecosystem and how much influence these people have, that person will probably say like, "Oh, I have no idea what you're talking about," because they are used to a traditional way of doing business. So pitching my fund to them is very hard. They will look at the industry and see, hey, there's only like Skims, Fenty, and Prime, so there's not that many success stories. So I rather just invest in an AI fund or a B2B SaaS fund because there's much more data. So pitching them is really hard. But then you also have like LPs who are maybe already in the industry. So maybe they own their own CPG brand and exited that and really work with celebrities and creators to scale that. Maybe they run their own influencer marketing agency. Maybe they had their own influencer management agency. Maybe they come at the media and entertainment space. Maybe they're celebrities themselves who truly understand that. Pitching those types of LPs is a lot easier than pitching the first bucket of LPs. So I think again it comes back to targeting. Who are you actually targeting, and are they a fit for your thesis?
Hmm. You mentioned a lot of these people don't necessarily understand the influencer space or don't really understand the creator economy. One of the risks that I guess a lot of people don't think about that I want to ask you about how you go about thinking about this and factoring it in is when you if you got a company and you decide, man, we're going to give this celebrity X% equity and we want them to become our spokesperson. Like if you're Congo brands and you've got this prime and you're like, all right, we'll give Logan Paul and KSI this much equity and they can be the face of our brand. You're indexing your entire reputation on these people. And if they get canceled, they mess up, they say something they're not supposed to, they do something they're not supposed to. You could see your entire revenue disappear overnight, unfortunately. How do you think about this risk as an investor? How do you make sure that the brand that you partner, the celebrity you partner with, isn't going to take the entire brand with one of their actions by ruining their own reputation?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. They call this key person risk. Actually, one of the most successful celebrity founded brands ever suffered from this. The company is called GC, which was co-founded by Kanye West in partnership with Adidas in 2013, a lifestyle brand. And I think in 2021 or in 2022, that brand was generating $2 billion in revenue per year. $2 billion. And to put that into perspective, that is 7% of Adidas' total revenue. And then, like Kanye West, he said a lot of things online and eventually also said like some anti Semitic things. And then Adidas was like, okay, we have to really cut our ties now with Kanye West. And they had to shut down GC, a company that was generating $2 billion in revenue every single year. So yeah, this is definitely something that we always look out for. We like the best celebrity founder brands are supported by celebrities, but not dependent on. Which also means is that yeah, the celebrity should not always be on the front end the celebrity should not always be on the front end of always the marketing and on the can and the name and that type of stuff. It's always better if they kind of have a back end position and support the company by also bringing in other faces and other people. I think that's how you build the most successful long term celebrity founded brands.
So if you're a founder and you're thinking, all right, Scott, I'm convinced of this. I'm going to go out there and find someone. It's important to know that one, don't make them the entire thing. Don't like center the entire thing around them. Have them be a part of it. But then also almost diversify as time goes on. Still, as you're using the revenue coming in from this promotion you're doing with this celebrity, use that to get more people, more faces on the brand. So it's not over indexed, right? Like almost like an investment diversification strategy. Do the same, but with the brands and faces that are associated with your own company.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's really about diversifying like faces and making sure you're never dependent on just one individual.
Hmm. Absolutely. Another thing that you kind of touched on was, when you were initially talking about your story, you talked about how you'd pair companies with celebrities. I think a lot of people have this perception from the outside that like the celebrity's the mastermind. They're like sitting around one day with their team, like, what should we do? You know what? Let's launch a hydration brand. And when I kind of started looking at this world, I realized, oh, that's not how things actually work. Congo Brands had Prime. They sought out Logan Paul, pursued his manager. I think for years it was up until they did it. Again, Fenty with Rihanna. Again, it was another company that owned it that gave her 30% equity. I want to give more exposure to how these deals work on the back end. If you're a founder, is it, can any founder kind of just go and pursue a celebrity, give them equity, and launch their own celebrity owned brand? I want to give more exposure to how these kind of deals work on the back end, really.
Yeah, so there's no one size fits all. Every deal is obviously a little bit different, but you can kind of categorize them in two buckets. So the first bucket is actually when the celebrity had their own ID. So it's their own ID. They come up with the ID and are like founders or co-founders from day one. They're like, hey, we actually want to do this. Let's find the team around it and let's actually execute this. And then you have a second deal and a second bucket, which are like already existing companies and they believe that a certain celebrity would be a great addition to their team. These could also be companies that are already in market, already have product market fit. So it could be a pre-seed stage startup, but also a Series A startup that is now onboarding like a celebrity. It also really depends on what is the role of the celebrity. So are you bringing these people in on co-founder roles or more as an ambassador role? It depends on who's the celebrity. Obviously, if you're bringing someone like a Rihanna on board, you have to give her much more equity than if you're giving someone like an influencer that has 1 million followers. So yeah, there's really no one size fits all. Every deal differs. I've seen deals where a celebrity gets a 1% equity stake, but I've also seen deals where a celebrity owns 80% of the company. Um, so yeah, nothing is. You should always just kind of do a gut check to see what is the value that the celebrity can add to me, and what is that worth to me. Is that worth 5%, 10%, 20%? And I think it's also important to put like a vesting schedule here. So I mean, like I see so many startups make the mistake. They want to get a celebrity on board, fire their network. They're able to get in touch with a celebrity who's not the best fit, but this person has like 30 million followers. They get a little bit starstruck, and they're like, oh yeah, if only 5% of that 30 million people are going to buy our product, we're going to be multi-millionaires. Well, spoiler alert, that's not how this industry works. And then they immediately give this person like a 10, 20% equity stake without actually having a good contract in place. The celebrity posts 2 or 3 times about the company, is not resulting in any sales. Now you have like a frustrated founding team, and now you also have like an unmotivated celebrity who's not very keen on promoting this further. But yeah, you gave this person a 20% equity stake, so it's really hard to get rid of these people. So what we always say is that you should always kind of date before you get married. So can you, for example, first do like a paid collaboration or like a co-branded line together to see if it's even translating into any sales, and seeing if you can add value to each other before you actually make a jump, or have like a vesting schedule in place where it's like, okay, per month you can get 1% equity stake, and then every month we just reflect, see if we're still in line with each other, see if we can add value to each other, and that can build up to the 20% equity stake that we're actually envisioning in the long term. So yeah, I would say that's kind of how you can go about it.
You mentioned the risks to look out for and how to make sure that the partnership is successful. But obviously, to get to that point, you first have to be able to get in touch with a celebrity. So, if you're a founder today and you're thinking, I've got this, I've identified this problem, I've developed an innovative product, I know this can be big, but I need to get in touch with a celebrity. How would you do it? You mentioned, a lot of people came to you in the first place because you had this ability to get in front of these deals with Selena Gomez, Jake Paul, DJ Khaled, all these people. You could get access to these deals. If someone wants to learn from you, like Scott, how do you do it? How would you kind of teach them? How would you walk them through this process of like actually getting in front of someone like this and pitching them and making it compelling enough for them?
Yeah, so I will start with the most common way, and then I will talk about the best way. But the most common way is through their management agencies. So a lot of them are managed by large management agencies who are overseeing all their business deals. The frustrating thing is that the business model of these management firms is different than actually like long-term equity building, because they have to pay rent, they have to pay their employees, they have all these other costs. So they get a 10 to 20% cut of whatever the celebrity makes. So they actually naturally prefer to do like a brand deal with a Nike or Gucci where the celebrity gets paid instantly and take a percentage of that, instead of doing like an equity deal with an unproven startup, hoping that in 10 years time that's going to be the next Skims Prime or Fenty or whatsoever. So there's a little bit of friction there. And then also often when you approach them for an equity deal, they say, okay, in addition to an equity deal, we also want to have a minimum guarantee of like a high six or even seven figure. And I'm like, no seed stage or Series A startup has $1 million laying around for a celebrity, not even knowing what that person is going to bring. So that just makes it very hard to do a deal. I do have to say that things are changing in the industry. Like all these management firms, they start to have their own venture departments. And it's also because the celebrity actually forces them to, because the celebrity sees all these very successful business deals and kind of tell their management like, look, search me that type of deals, that's actually what I'm looking out for. I don't care about the next million in my bank account because I already have 50. So they're kind of being forced to search for these deals, because otherwise the celebrity is also going to walk out of the door to another management agency who's actually providing that type of deals, including the 10 to 20% they normally get. So I think that's kind of the most common way. I always like if you have a personal in. So can you work directly with these celebrities? I think that always results in the best outcomes. But that is very hard because good luck trying to get in touch with Selena Gomez or Rihanna or whatsoever. That's impossible.
What did you do when you started out? Were you kind of cold DMing and hustling your way through these management agencies, or were you able to kind of find those personal wins with these people?
I was kind of lucky. Well, actually, two things. So I didn't know anyone in the Dutch celebrity ecosystem, bigger names. So I mentioned I knew a couple of smaller influencers. So I actually did an equity deal myself. I actually onboarded one of the largest Dutch influencers who's very entrepreneurial. He launched his own companies. He did his equity deals in the past. I actually onboarded him as part of my company on an equity deal as well. So I literally basically did what I actually was providing as a service to get that certain expertise and network in. So I think that definitely helped, because now instead of me reaching out, it was him reaching out to celebrities saying, hey, we are doing this. Would you love to talk? And they're like, oh, yeah, Kai, of course I would love to talk to you because you're like a co celebrity instead of a random guy called Scott. Hey, we have this very cool proposition, AI powered software company. It helps you to diversify your business model for the long term. They're like, what are you talking about, Scott? And then I think another thing that really helped for me is content creation. So I actually had to educate the industry a lot about what are creator equity deals, how do they work, what are good examples, what are bad examples. So I think that's also how you found me, is through content creation. For the last 3 years, I've been posting almost every single day on LinkedIn about the celebrity ecosystem, which has also helped me to gain more than 10 million views in the last year, which then helps me to kind of become this go-to players whenever celebrities and creators are thinking about launching their own brands or doing equity deals. It's like, hey, let me actually check in with Scott to see what he thinks. just because I built this thought leadership in the space.
Hmm. Interesting. That's fascinating. The last thing I want to ask you, Scott, is a lot of times, investors have to manage this influx of information. There's a whole bunch of news happening, a whole bunch of things happening. If they keep learning, keep yourself updated. The question has two parts. One is, how do you stay up to date? Are there like special websites or resources that you'll use to keep up with the news that's going on, and the new brands that are launching and new trends? And then second is, how do you kind of filter that in your mind? How do you actually manage that information pipeline?
I don't have a structured process, to be honest. I read a lot though, so I read about like an hour per day, like online, news website, LinkedIn, to see all type of interesting information. I work out also every single day for an hour, and in that hour I listen to podcasts, whether they relate to like venture capital or the celebrity space. So that's already 2 hours a day that I'm consuming like information that I can then turn into a thought process. So I create a lot of content as well, which also forces me to put this into perspective. So I'm just writing about a post and I'm like, hey, let me actually think through what like why does this make sense or why doesn't this make sense? So that is a good example. And then lastly, I would say is I connect with a lot of other folks in the industry. So if there's a specific expert in the cannabis space, the example that I previously mentioned, I reach out to that person. I'm like, hey, this celebrity is launching this brand. Would love to get your take on it. Can we jump on a quick call to discuss why you think this is gonna work or not work and that type of stuff? So I think that's also something that I do to gain information.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, that's it for the questions I've got. Are there any stories, any lessons that you'd like to end the interview off with?
I think there's definitely a couple things that I want to leave the audience with. Like in general, I'm just very bullish on the industry. As mentioned, like we're kind of now entering this second wave of celebrity founder brands. So I'm just very excited about building real value with them, solving customer problems, and hopefully building the next iconic consumer brands together with celebrities and creators.